Well, hello and welcome back to D'Angeloni. I'm fascinated with the occurrence that when things turn to their absolute worst in one's life, whatever they may be, and of course, this level of despair and suffering is relative to your circumstances, that you feel the strongest and have the most clarity under extreme duress. I would surmise that this would not be the case during difficult times, but maybe it's in our DNA. You need to be at your sharpest during challenging times, and you may note that through this period of strain, though this period of strain and difficulty is no walk in the garden, that after you fought through the battle, you actually feel more alive than when things are free and easy. I find that most characteristics and traits in people are sublime and vague. Most of us are mush inside and walk around with armor and badges that can very easily be stripped away, unless you've managed to somehow build a castle and moat to protect yourself. Have you ever thought that what you forget may be more significant than what you remember, and that what you don't do may be more significant than what you do? It's an interesting concept. When I was at a concert seeing the band, a great group by the way, at the Westbury Theater in Long Island, I noticed this written on the bathroom wall. It was "Beware the Great Underdose." This was 1975, and I never forgot this line. This was the first time I would see them in concert, and I would see them two more times further down the road. And they were a tremendous group to see live. And Martin Scorsese agreed. He would record their last tour in 1976 called The Last Waltz, and it became a wonderful movie about the tour, their lives on the road since the early 1960s. And this concert featured more classic musicians and bands than any other concert, including Woodstock. The band toured and recorded with Bob Dylan, and if you want to see a great concert, I suggest watching this movie. Anyway, back to the line, "Beware the Great Underdose." My interpretation of it is this: life falls short most of the time, and much of life is boring and tedious, but naturally one cannot be high all the time. And this line was the first part of the title of my first publication. I always loved the proverb, "Wine, women, and song." Undoubtedly, these three objects are certainly among the finest things in life. There's nothing more beautiful and lovely as an attractive woman. The way they look, dress, move, smile, it's all intoxicating. And wine or any other alcoholic beverage can make you feel sublime and feel free from life's restraints. But if you overdo it, you can pay the price. But when I was much younger, I never thought of it that way. And when you speak of song, it rounds out the other two. Alcohol and women certainly can let you down. Women are human, and we all know what liquor can do if you overindulge. You pay the price for anything in excess, but not so much with music. In the book Musicophilia, Tales of Music in the Brain, a book written by the neurologist Oliver Sacks, whose story was based on the wonderful movie Awakenings, featuring Robin Williams and Robert De Niro from 1990, showcases how music can successfully be used for therapy and treatment in many neurological and brain diseases. Music appears to be intrinsic to our nature, and disorders such as Parkinson's, blindness, synesthesia, Alzheimer's, and dementia have shown evidence that music can normalize people with these afflictions and bring these people out of their shell and reduce inhibitions, which is remarkable. Music can do so much for the human soul. It has always been my first and true love. It never disappoints unless the music is not good, of course, which is a subject we will visit later on. I always like this line. I don't believe in astrology, but as Joan Rivers once said, Geminis are like that. I noticed a list of Sagittarians, and being a Sagittarian myself, I couldn't help but feel that if you invited these people to a party, just these people, it would be a memorable one, and they are as follows, including the living and the deceased: Richard Pryor, Frank Sinatra, Little Richard, Frank Zappa, Jim Morrison, Deacon Jones, Winston Churchill, Sammy Davis Jr., Jimi Hendrix, William F. Buckley, Woody Allen, Dick Van Dyke, Larry Bird, Patty Duke, Joe DiMaggio, Tim Conway, Wilson Pickett, Beethoven, Stephen Wright, Edward G. Robinson, Harpo Marx, Mark Twain, Dickie Betts, John Malkovich, Billy Eckstine, Greg Allman, Brad Pitt, Emerson Fittipaldi, Keith Richards, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Steven Spielberg, Ray Liotta, Tom Waits, Samuel Jackson, Flip Wilson, we're almost done, Abby Hoffman, Bette Midler, Jamie Foxx, Kirk Douglas, Rodney Dangerfield, Ed Harris, Tom Hayden, Noam Chomsky, Steve Buscemi, and Aaron Rodgers. Now that's a cast of characters. I once heard this line. It was, I forget who said this. It might have been Truman Capote. He said, "It doesn't really matter what happens. What matters more is what was supposed to happen," which means everything is open to interpretation and perception. And without that clause, where would novels be? I knew that I was wired for sound when I was very young, as I recall listening to songs from a neighbor's radio when I was as young as 4 or 5, and telling my mom that I liked particular songs. And I actually recall two of them, Venus by Paul Anka and Alley Oop by the Hollywood Argyles. And I'm sure that there were a few others, but can't recall them now. And this was around 1960. Mom would take note and let me know when these songs popped up on the radios and sing along with me. Within a few years, I was listening to the radio more often, and my cousin Richie, who was about 8 years older than me, had this great vinyl record collection of 45s, most of which you probably won't know what these are. And when I would visit his home, he would let me play the songs on his record player, and I would listen to Bobby Darin and Leslie Gore, Chuck Berry, Dee Dee Sharp, The Miracles, Gary U.S. Bonds, Dion and the Belmonts, the Beach Boys, Fats Domino, and so on. I was now hooked. In a few years, I started buying my own records, which were cheap back in the 60s. And my mother would limit me, of course, but I never stopped buying music to listen to. This would continue on for decades, right up until everything went digital. And I subscribed to iTunes and Spotify and have dozens of playlists. When I was about 12 or 13, I started keeping tabs on what tunes I liked and which ones I would purchase. And I was listening to the radio constantly. I always wonder why I didn't play an instrument when I was young, though I did take up the drums for 1 year, but that faded away quickly. I wouldn't take up the piano until I was 26. And the music back in the 1950s through the 70s, to me at least, was some of the most popular, best music that came out. And don't get me wrong, the jazz music that was created from around the 1920s through the 1970s was absolutely incredible. I wish I spent more time with it. And R&B is not to be forgotten, especially the R&B from the late 1940s through the 1980s. The music now, I'm not so sure. Personally, I think most of it's disappointing, a little bit weak, and somewhat forgettable. But back in the 1960s and 70s, the competition among the artists was very intense. And this is what made the music better. But this is what also made music so delightful and exceptional. Look at the 1960s alone. You had the music from Memphis, from Motown, from LA, from Great Britain, the East Coast, which of course included New York, Philly, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, Muscle Shoals, Alabama, Chicago, Canada, and San Francisco. And I'm not ignoring the music that was done in the 1980s going forward. There is still some very solid music that is being created and produced. That will most likely never change. The difference is the quantity. There is so little of it. So thank you for being part of this episode, and I should be back soon. Thank you very much. Bye.